So last week, you and I met and you interviewed me about my career. And I thought it might be a fun idea, mainly for the benefit of my students, but I guess for the whole world too, to have you interviewed like that so people can learn about you and your career choices and your journey to get to where you are today. And so we're including this as some required material for my class called Aqua Business, starting a business in aquaculture. And
I like it.
I thought it might be nice for the students to have, a real world example of someone who followed your kind of career path and what it took to get there and some of the lessons you've learned along that journey. So can you maybe start by just giving us a quick 1 minute synopsis of where you've come from and where you're at?
When I was in college, I had the opportunity to start working at a saltwater fish store and got my first fish tank. And I was just kind of obsessed ever since. When I was there, I started to learn about phytoplankton and rotifers, and I started breeding seahorses. So that was early 2000s. I won't date myself, but way back when. And then kind of got into clownfish. And then over the years, I started growing corals, mostly soft corals and SPS, and selling those to wholesalers in Miami. And then several years, I decided to open a saltwater fish store. So I did a retail store that was really heavy on education. So we did a lot of classes, community outreach, things like that. I decided to go back to school and get my degree. And I went to UF. I got my degree in fish health and aquaculture. And I joined the research world. So I got a job at Hub SeaWorld Research Institute in San Diego. And then I started working at the Dallas World Aquarium.
So I think we decided that the first time that we met, you were at Hubs, and I think we met at a conference. Maybe it was a MACNA conference.
The funny thing, okay, I was looking, I was like, when did we meet? There's a picture of the two of us back in 2017 at an MBI. So I don't know if we met before then or if that was when we met.
You said early 2000s, you were doing some seahorse stuff. And so it's possible that we met online through forums back in the seahorse days. Because I always thought your name sounded very familiar. And
probably
pre-social media, we had these things called forums. There was the seahorse group or something, the signathid.com or seahorse.org or something like that, right?
Yeah. And I was certainly a part of all those forums, trying to just find out information because there wasn't that much out there. And I really didn't know any breeders. So a lot of the information was online. Yeah.
So I think we may have talked through
probably
one of those seahorse forums back in the early 2000s, because that's when I was getting into seahorses too. So I guess we'll jump right in. I asked my students to each submit 2 questions. Some of them submitted more than that, and there's some good ones. First question, and this is from Parker. What prompted you to pursue a career in the aquarium industry?
Yeah, it was a very natural evolution for me. I did not get my undergraduate degree in aquaculture or anything fish related. I wanted to do marine biology, and everybody I talked to was like, that's a horrible idea. There's no money, just don't do that. And so I didn't, but I was still so much in love with it. I did it as a hobby. And then eventually I started my 2 businesses that kind of just pushed me further into the career path. And then I decided to go back to school in aquaculture specifically. We knew how to breed so many species, but they weren't being done. We knew technically on paper, but they weren't commercialized in any way. So I really kind of got passionate about, okay, there's been so much stuff. Let's figure out how to commercialize a lot of these species. So that is kind of when I decided to do it, not as a business, but more of a full-time career going into aquaculture.
Yeah, I've kind of had a similar revelation in recent years. I've moved from, the holy grail is raise a brand new species that's never been raised. But I realize that doesn't get us anywhere. It's the real difficulty is in bringing them to commercial production.
Yeah, bringing up enough numbers that you can make an impact in their collection and in the industry for sure.
Okay, next one, also from Parker, and this is a loaded question that you could probably spend a day.
All right, Parker. All right.
Don't feel like you have to say everything here, but maybe give a snippet of advice. What advice do you have for someone wanting to start a small business relating to saltwater fish and corals? And I'm sure, like I said, you have plenty, but how about a gem of advice?
If you are thinking more of a retail path, be very prepared to be online. that is a very strong part of the market now, is even if you have a really large customer base near you, they're buying online as well. So it's very hard to get customer loyalty, and it's very hard to get enough people consistently to your business without going online.
Definitely. From Riley, what was the biggest challenge in founding Manta?
So I haven't announced exactly what Manta's doing yet, but it is a very different type of business, and I'm working on a prototype right now. Prototype is a whole different world. It is very capital intensive. It's very time intensive, and it's just something I'm constantly learning. Like every single day I'm learning something new, and I didn't know. I didn't understand how big of a mountain creating a prototype and actually coming to market was going to be. I just was like, oh, it's a great idea. And then you just put stuff together, and then it's like, it's supply chain, it's manufacturing, it's design, it's patents, it's testing, it's UL testing, it's, even FDA approval because I have Wi-Fi. Like there's so many different components that I hadn't considered. So every single day, it's a race to learn as much as possible.
So without any spoilers here, of course, so you're revolving the business around a product that you've developed, an innovative thing that doesn't currently exist.
Yes.
That there is an unfilled need for.
Hopefully.
And so just a follow-up question from me on that, is the plan then to continue developing other products or to mainly revolve the company around this one thing?
Right now, my focus is just around this one thing, and I'll have different iterations, different types and, features available, different sizes. There are different things that I would like to see created in the saltwater industry, but right now I'm just staying very focused.
It's one of the neat things about this field. In so many different industries, you look at it and you say, what's left to invent? Right. And I feel like our industry, there's so much left to invent. And
there's so much. Yeah. Like we're still so early on. Yeah. It's amazing. Even the last 5 years, there's been significant advances in just, chemistry and lighting and techniques.
Well, that sure keeps it exciting.
It does.
All right. Another one from Riley. What would you say has been the most rewarding part of your career?
I think probably teaching. I'm really big into education and sharing knowledge. When I first started out, I didn't like to share because I felt like I didn't know enough. Like I felt like somebody always knew more than I did. And so I was very shy about helping people. And then I realized, if you know 5 steps ahead of somebody else, they would appreciate to know those 5 steps. So it's not about having a doctorate in something. It's more like, hey, this worked. Even something small like, how to mix salt water. Somebody has to learn that, how to use a refractometer. You have to learn all of that. So education has been kind of my biggest cornerstone. So I try to mentor a lot of people, and I do that in aquatics stuff. So I mentor a lot of people, even with like phytoplankton and copepod production. Like I still mentor quite a few people, but also in the business side, I didn't mention, but I went back to school and I got 2 masters in business. And so I mentor a lot of people starting companies. And that is from like an idea stage all the way through launching a company, just depending on where they are.
So from Kylie, we have, what made you want to start your own business versus continuing to work in your field for someone else? And why did you choose the name that you did, Manta?
So my first business that I did, I started a business because I was very cocky and I just thought I could do it better. I was looking at other people in the industry and I didn't think that they were doing things well. When I did a fish store, like all of the local fish stores, they had sick fish, or they had no selection, or the people that worked there, they were just trying to sell things. So I started the business because I honestly just thought I could do a better job. I had no idea about business. I didn't even understand pricing, marketing. Like I didn't understand any of it. I literally was like, well, if you take an item and you mark it up X percentage, then you make profit. Like that was as basic as my thinking was. And so I had a massive learning curve. But that's why, honestly, I started my first business. It wasn't like I thought, I had like an amazing special idea. I just thought I could do it better. I chose Manta. Honestly, before I even had a business concept, I knew I was going to start my 3rd business. And I had this logo in mind. I just was dreaming of this Manta logo. And so when it came to naming my business, I was like, I got it. I'm naming it Manta.
So the logo came first, the image of
The logo 100% came first. I just love my logo. Yeah.
So this next one from Kylie, where do you plan on taking Manta Systems and what do you want to accomplish with it?
Yeah. So again, this kind of went back to my whole education thing. So I started writing articles, and some are more scientific than others, but they're all what I personally know about the industry. So it's everything from the difference between freshwater and saltwater all the way to high-end chemistry as a way to just have free information. I feel like in this industry, there's a lot of myths and legends and a little bit less fact. That's kind of what I'm doing with the website now, is just kind of trying to put out as much positive, good information as possible.
Because I've seen some of your articles that have come out in the last few weeks about carbon dosing and medication and hydrogen peroxide use. So I'm planning on making some of those required reading for some of my other classes because I find it really useful. From Toby. I love this question. This one stood out as I was going through them. How do you know who a good partner is going to be?
I look for a founder's grit. I look for somebody who is willing to do whatever it takes to make their company successful. There's a lot of people who want business because they don't want to have a boss, or it sounds easy, or they want to be creative, or they like the concept of owning a business. That's not what it's about. Owning a business is about working until 2 a.m. every single night for 4 years. Owning a business is doing whatever is uncomfortable because it needs to happen. And it is pushing yourself beyond your boundaries because you're so passionate about what you're doing, you're gonna make it work. If we're talking more like co-founders, I've never had a co-founder. I've always wanted one. I would really love one. I don't want to build Manta systems by myself. I've been wanting someone, but you have to find somebody with the right skill set. Most people are like, I love fish, I love corals, let's build a business together. You have the same skill set. You have to have somebody that has the opposite. Who's the accountant in the group? Who's the marketing person? You have to have somebody that is going to match whatever your weakness is their strength. That's the first thing. The second thing is going to be integrity and work ethic. So you have to match somebody else's integrity and work ethic. So if you're working 80 hours a week and they're working 30, you don't have a good match. If you are running a marathon, you want somebody running it with you.
I love what you said before about people, a common reason for starting your own business is I don't want to have a boss. I want to be my own boss. And over the years, that has been the most common thing I've heard. And I agree. I think it's one of the worst reasons to start a business. And I've heard some of my own employees at times say, I don't get paid enough to work on holidays. Maybe I should go start my own thing. And I say, yeah, go start your own thing. See if you ever get a day off again.
Yeah, and enjoy that 7-day work week. People who have a small business, it's the people who want to work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40. Like that is really the small business life. And it's difficult.
Okay, let's see what Toby has next. His next question is, he wants to become a successful entrepreneur. How does he do that without rushing and getting in over his head? Do you have any advice for, because obviously we know lots of startups where the first thing that happens is they go into enormous debt.
I mean, you definitely obviously don't want to drown, but you have to move at an extreme pace. So people who are like, oh, I just kind of mosey and I'm going to start a business and I'll take 3-4 years. I mean, that company's just not getting off the ground. What can you do today? What can you do tomorrow? What can you do next week? What are your goals next month, the next 6 months? When are you getting off the ground as fast as possible? So there is a lot of speed there. But it can't be financial speed. Like you have to be able to do as much as possible on your own. Like you are the accounting department, the marketing department, you're the CEO, you're every single part of the company until you're successful. Personally, I've never gone into debt for any company I've had because I can only purchase as much as I have in my bank account. So you have to just figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. That's great advice. I have a friend who started a small fish breeding business and he took out a family loan, a loan from someone in his family to start it. It wasn't a lot. It was only $10,000. And he ran it for several years and then he sold the business and got out. And I asked him when he was getting out and going back into full-time teaching, I said, well, looking back, what would you do different if you started this again from scratch? And he said, I wouldn't have borrowed that money. He said, instead of, taking this $10,000 and buying all the stuff I needed right then, I would have started very small and just reinvested any little bit of money I made. And I think that's, kind of to your point, don't go into debt at the start. From Amanda, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start working with coral propagation and or restoration?
I would say go find somebody who's already doing it and learn from them. Learn on somebody else's dime. So there are incredible researchers around the world. Jamie Craig's, I'm actually interviewing him next week, Dr. Craig's, and he does, coral breeding. So getting under one of those incredible researchers, they're going to move your career decades in a few years. Dr. Craig's dives around the world. He collects coral spawns and then he brings the eggs into the lab and grows them out and does significant research. So there's a huge mix of being able to make a big difference, work in labs, still be out in the ocean.
Amanda's next question, this is a good one. Do you prefer the administrative or the hands-on side of your job?
I love both. So I love the hands-on aspect. I love working with fish, with corals. I'm a phytoplankton nerd. Like I love all of that, but I enjoy the business part. And when you say administrative, that sounds super boring. That sounds like paperwork in a cubicle. And, I don't do a lot of paperwork in a cubicle, but it's the marketing, it's the go-to-market strategy, it's getting a business off the ground. To me, is extremely exciting. It's every single day is you're learning something completely new. So I like a mix of both. Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out, and this is another thing I wanted to talk about anyway. Some people really love doing something like breeding fish or propagating corals or just being out on the water. Lots of people come into the idea of starting a business because of their passion for doing that thing. But without that love and appreciation of the other side of it, maybe starting a business isn't for you, right? Because all you want to do is the hands-on side, then you're probably better suited to working for a company that does that, where all you have to do is the breeding or the propagation or, that part of it.
What I would say is you don't have to be the CEO if it's your idea. Like you don't have to run the business. You can partner with somebody who would just love to run the business. And that's where that co-founder comes in.
Okay. Elizabeth asks, what advice do you have for someone who wants to be an aquarist at a public aquarium?
I think public aquariums are really unique space. You get to take care of really incredible animals. You have really great opportunities. I think there is a lot of desirability to work at a public aquarium. Personally, it wasn't for me because, again, it comes down to pay. It comes down to how many hours a week are you going to work? What does that pay look like? What does that life structure look like? So I worked, 50 to 60 hours a week for years, and that was a lot. So that wasn't a career path that I would necessarily recommend. At that point in my life, I want more of a life balance. I would say, find a public aquarium that you're really passionate about, that maybe they're working with a specific type of breeding or species or something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah. And one thing you mentioned earlier that we can wrap into this public aquarium discussion, you said, take some time working on someone else's dime, right? My best career advice I give to every student is find someone who's doing what you think you want to do and talk to them about how they spend their day and decide, can you live, for decades spending your days like this person spends their days? And for public aquariums, there's always internships available where you can get a feel for how you spend your day. The big problem at a public aquarium is that there's this honeymoon period where you're in awe. Oh my gosh, look at the rays and look at the sharks. And I could never, ever, ever get sick of this. And not that you do, but you realize after a few years, sometimes sooner, that I'm just feeding and cleaning.
I'm just scraping algae and cutting up food.
And that's really cool. But in the end, you're cleaning filters, you're scraping algae, you're feeding fish, you're siphoning poop. And so once the novelty, and for some people it never does, but once that novelty wears off of I'm getting to look at sharks every day or whatever it is you love about the aquarium, then you start to realize that the nature of your work is not as fulfilling after years on end. And then the other thing, as you said, these things need care 7 days a week. There's no such thing as shutting it down. Well, whether it's COVID or a holiday or anything, someone still needs to be there taking care of everything. And the other thing you mentioned about public aquarium being the pay and the desirability of the job, that's what keeps the pay low, right? There's a never-ending line of people that want to give it a try, which means that everyone is expendable, which means that there's no incentive to really reward you with lots of money to stay long term. I don't want to make generalizations. Some aquariums pay better than others, but it's kind of a great career when you're still in that college student frame of mind where you're still okay having a roommate and renting an apartment and
exactly,
working for low wages and working on weekends. But once you shift, if you're the kind of person that wants to start a family, have kids, have a weekend with your spouse, it's hard. I'll just say it's a hard way to continue living as you become an adult.
And some public aquariums, as you said, they are better than others. Those places have low turnover, which is a nicer environment. You know, you're working with people that have strong skill sets. You have public aquariums that are not as nice and they have very high turnover. And that becomes really frustrating because you're constantly training a new person that's not going to stick around. And then you're training the next new person. And so that's kind of difficult as well.
Yeah. And another great piece of advice talking about turnover is if you have the time to really spend looking at job openings, take note. I mean, there are aquariums that I looked at over the years and said, oh, I would love to go work there. And I'm like, it's funny, they have a position opening every 6 months there.
Every 6 months. Isn't that weird?
It's really weird.
Yeah.
So that was a red flag for me. Elizabeth also asks, she says, I saw on your resume you have a master's certificate in aquaculture. Now, that's what many of our students are getting at Carteret Community College. I'd like to know, what is that certificate and how has it been helpful in your career path?
Having that certificate allowed me to work at Hubs, SeaWorld Research Institute. Without that, I would not have gotten an interview. So even though I don't think I really learned that much in the program, very cocky me, I feel like I could have taught most of those classes because I had already been doing it for 20 years at that point. But having that piece of paper, it opens doors.
Yeah, and I think that's important to remember. And if you're trying to get a job working for a small business, they have the freedom to get to know you and know your knowledge and say, I don't care whether you have a degree or not. That means nothing. I can see that you know how to do this and I'll give you a shot.
Yeah, I can teach you what you need to know. Yeah.
And it's not that SeaWorld or a public aquarium or universities. I think very often it's that they get such a huge volume of applicants. They need some things that they can just say, all right, we're gonna use this criteria, these set of criteria just to narrow down the field. So
I 100% agree with that. I do think a lot of times that they want people to have some sort of degree in this space. They want to know that you're comfortable being in a bleach bucket. They want to know that you're willing to scrub something that smells like a protein skimmer. Like they want to know that you are going to stick around and you're not just there because penguins are cool. So I do think that is kind of why they specifically look for that. If you have a degree in aquaculture, whatever, you've done grunt work. You've done a lot of grunt work.
That's right.
So I think that is a little part of it. And I personally don't care about degrees because I can teach you anything that I need you to know if you have the right work ethic. That's what I look for. I look for integrity and work ethic because if I trust you and you're willing to learn and work hard, I can teach you anything. But I know for a lot of institutions, they don't want to spend a lot of time training new people on a regular basis. It's too expensive to constantly train your workforce all the way starting at A, all the way to get to Z for them to quit.
One other thing, and I guess in defense of degrees, a degree shows that you can jump onto a multi-year project and stay with it. It shows that if you don't have the ability to show up, be on time, follow instructions, retain some knowledge, and meet deadlines, you're not going to have a degree. And those things right there are important in most jobs, right? Being on time, meeting deadlines, following instructions. If you can do those things, you can get a degree. And so that's a demonstration that all right, we have someone that can show up and follow instructions.
I agree. A degree doesn't express skill set or knowledge. I've taken 5 accounting classes and I have 2 business degrees. And the only thing I learned in accounting was to hire an accountant. That's it. Like, I mean, I passed the classes with good grades, but it was like you memorize and then you regurgitate and you pass the class. It doesn't mean that I know anything about accounting or I should be trusted with the books. I should not be, you know.
Karen here, what made you make the jump from your first business into aquaculture?
I was talking to Andy Ryan at, I think it was a MACNA, and he was talking about the clown triggers, you know, that had been bred and all of the, and I was like, wait, what? We know how to breed clown triggers and they're not available? Like, besides clownfish, dotty-backs, a couple of gobies, pretty much everything was coming from the ocean, and that really bothered me. So I was like, okay, well, let me use my knowledge, my skill set. At that time, I'd been doing phytoplankton rotifers for 20 years. And I had worked with all the basic species. And I was like, okay, let's figure out how to jump into the more complicated species and figure out the commercialization. So that was me just trying to make some sort of a difference, some sort of a change.
Okay. Nathaniel, have you noticed any common trends with startups that are successful?
I mean, I have. I think most of it comes down to the founder, the CEO, the amount of skill that they have and the grit that they have to make their company successful. And the second thing is just really understanding the industry before they jump into it, really understanding what are they offering that's significantly different than what's already available. Because people are very comfortable. They don't like to change their habits. So if they're already using X, why do they want to switch to Y? And most people are blinded by, oh, it's better. It's my product and it fits this, but actually doing the validation. Do customers think it's better? And is it worth their extra money or their time to learn a new product, to switch into something else? Really understanding that market really, really well before they start a company. That's probably the 2 big things.
All right. Nathaniel's next question. Investors, how do you find them and vet them?
There are angel investors, which are high wealth individuals who are willing to give you money. Those have low requirements. So typically there is some sort of profit sharing or they get a percentage of your company. And those investors, of course, you want to do thorough background checks. What else have they invested in? Go talk to those people. Like, what kind of investor are they? Are they very hands-on? Are they going to be in your space, be like, this is a bad idea every single day? Are they very hands-off? They're just like, hey, I want you to work on this and you do you. So just trying to find out who that person is as an individual is really important, and their expectations. Make sure you're on the same page. Some investors are looking for a big payout, which means in 5 to 7 years, they're expecting you to sell the company. And if that's not on your roadmap, then that's not your investor. Right. So just trying to make sure you're on the exact same page. It's a hard partnership to find somebody who understands aquaculture. And you want somebody who understands aquaculture because it takes a lot of years to get a successful aquaculture operation going, from getting broodstock to getting breeding to figuring out the system and commercializing on a large scale, figuring out your supply lines. It takes years to do things, and they have to understand the ebb and flow of markets, you know. So you definitely want somebody who understands kind of what you're doing and the struggles and going to be there with you. I would always like to get an investor that's also a strategic partner, somebody who can actually help you on your journey. So somebody who has some sort of experience or expertise, or maybe they know people that can help you, or maybe they own fish stores, or they own a wholesaler so that you have a way to funnel your product in. So there's different types of investors that are not just going to give you money, but they're also going to give you opportunity.
Yeah. And hopefully if you have someone that has that kind of money to invest, it's because they were very successful at something already. And maybe that's a good thing to know too. As you said, some background checks. Are they working with family money and throwing it around with no knowledge, or are they coming in because they were a successful person that knew how to make some other business work well? So Ben, you attained your MBA, MS of Innovation and Entrepreneurship in August of this year. I'd love to hear the reason for pursuing this. What was something you took away from the program that you use today?
A lot, but I think one of the biggest things is, I guess, speed. like getting things going as fast as possible. Like, and I'll use this podcast then as an example. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I was booking guests on this podcast before I had a name for the podcast.
So how long ago
Before
was that?
it was a couple weeks ago. Like I came up with a name and I was like, hey, I want to do a podcast. Cool. Who do I know who's willing to be a guest? I'm sending emails like, hey, are you willing to be on my podcast? And, I'm 100% putting myself out there. I don't have my ducks in a row, but I'm going to figure it out. Like I was literally filming the episodes before I knew how to edit, So it's the speed in which you have to like move, I think is probably one of the biggest things that I learned in business school. Yeah.
Well, you have a great ability to follow through, because I've been filming things for about a decade and I still haven't learned how to edit. So I either put a long, rambling, raw video up on YouTube, or they just take up space on a hard drive somewhere and never get used.
Yeah. Editing is very difficult, but it's a really good skill to learn.
Oh my God. Yeah, I need it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Ben's got some great ones here. As someone who's considering starting an aquaculture related business, there are so many random thoughts I get daily. How do you effectively break down these ideas, organize them, and translate them into action?
So I'm such a nerd when it comes to like scheduling and like organization, but I literally have spreadsheets for everything. Like I'm a big nerd, but I put everything that needs to happen down and I break it into very, very small components. And so I don't say I need to work on marketing. Marketing is a massive umbrella. It's scary to jump onto it. How do you start marketing? And so if I have 20 minutes at the end of the day and my goal is to start on marketing, I don't even know where to start on that. So I break it down into very small chunks. Okay, I need to open a Facebook account. I need to open an Instagram account. I need to start a website. I break it down into very, very specific chunks. And so I know that if I have 20 minutes, I can open up a Facebook account in 20 minutes. Check. I can open up my LinkedIn account in 20 minutes, check. So there's very specific things that you can work on, and I color coordinate everything. So what is the most important thing that I work on, and how long will it take to do? So I can look at my thing and go, okay, I have an hour. So let me look at what red items can I do in the next hour? And I check those off the box. And then I kind of work down my list. Then I reorganize my list every single week. But I am a very intense person, if you can't tell. Like I set really big goals. So if I accomplish 80% of my goals every week, that's a win. If I accomplish 100% of my goals, I'm not striving hard. So I push myself hard every single day. And I typically don't go to bed until I've accomplished my minimum goals every single day, which means I don't sleep very much. But I always try to break everything down. And I describe it as like you have 10,000 feet in the air goals, which are like your big concepts. And then you have your ground level goals, which are like, incorporating an LLC. Like that sounds scary, but that takes 10 minutes online. That doesn't take anything. So I work constantly throughout the day. There isn't a moment in most days where I have downtime. I'm literally scheduled out because, as you know, I write numerous articles a week. I'm doing the podcast. I do newsletters. I just finished my first book. I'm working on my second book. I'm building a company. I have a full-time job. I teach, as well. So like I'm constantly pushing the envelope of what I can do every single day to make sure that all of my goals are moving forward.
I'm tired just hearing you say these things.
It's a lot, right? But I have this drive, like life is so incredibly short. And I'm trying to just get as much done as possible. The idea that, you want to work as little as possible and then enjoy life and go to the beach and whatever else. But I love what I do. Like I love starting a business. I love teaching. I love aquaculture and I love every single aspect of it. So for me, like pushing full steam ahead is so exciting for me. Like it fuels every part of my life.
Inspiring answer. So Ben, how do I overcome fear of the unknown and uncertainty to start a business with a family in the mix? So Ben is married and expecting a first child very soon. And that's a scary thing.
Yeah.
Suddenly you have a much bigger responsibility and starting a business is risky.
This is really risky, and I will not give you the traditional advice of just do it, just, jump off the cliff and then figure out the parachute. I will never give somebody that advice because I won't do that myself. I hedge all of my bets. I will work full time and work part time on my side hustle until I have enough money that I can switch something over, or I figure out a way to get more money in the bank. The reason I teach part time is because that puts more money in the bank. So when I do decide to jump off the cliff, I have a bigger cushion. So I feel like you can always do a side hustle. You can always figure out a way to do something nights, weekends, and get that going before you take any sort of financial risk. And as far as like the fear part, you're never not going to be afraid. You're never going to have a day where you're like 100% confident. This is the right move. I should quit my job today and not have a paycheck. You're never going to have that day. You're going to have a lot of fear the first few years that you have a business, because every single time something ebbs and flows, you're just like finances. Am I going to be able to pay myself and my workers every single week? It is scary. It is a very scary thing. So having the biggest nest egg as possible is the biggest comfort that you can have.
All right. Another great one here from Ben. What has been the lowest point of your career, and what did you do to bounce back?
That's hard. I have failed more times than I'd like to admit. And I think failure is a really, really important part of learning business. It is something that everybody's going to do. So you can't be afraid to fail. And like the first time that you trip and fall on your face, like you sit there and you're like, oh my God, this really hurts. It's like so painful. It's difficult. You're embarrassed to get back up. But you do. And then, you start trudging along again. And when you trip the next time, you're like, oh my God, that sucks. That's embarrassing. But you know how to get up again. And then the third time you trip, you're like, that sucks. And you just get back up. And then like by the 20th time you've tripped, you're just like, whatever. And you're just moving ahead. Like it doesn't even faze you anymore. So part of that is just getting that resilience and saying, I don't care what people think. I don't care if people see me fall on my face. I don't care, if I fail, because if you're failing, you're at least trying. And most people are not willing to try. Most people are too afraid of social backlash or what people are going to say or a financial issue. Like they're so afraid of failure that they're not going to ever get their dream off the ground. So even if you're failing, you're at least trying. I would say one of my lowest points, and this was for me, financial stress is one of the biggest ones. So when I opened my fish store, the first fish shipment that I ever got in, I ordered all aquaculture. This was a brand new system. It never had fish in it before. I cycled it, and I got all of my fish in, and they got Brucanella, and I lost every single fish. And I lost every single fish at my grand opening, where I had marketed to every person I've ever met, come to my fish store. And fish were literally dying in front of my customers. And it was so horrible to deal with. Of course, the fish loss was terrible. The financial part was really hard because I'd put all of my money into my first big fish shipment, right? Now I don't have money to buy new fish. So that was it was embarrassing. Like, who wants to buy fish from a fish store with their grand opening? Everybody saw me fall on my face. So that was very difficult. Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say that what you said about failure, I think, is so incredibly important. And I heard this very well articulated on an episode of Hidden Brain, one of my favorite podcasts. They did a study on failure and how people cope with it. And one of their big findings in the study was that wildly successful people don't have a lower rate of failure. They have a higher tolerance for failure, which is exactly what you just said. And
that's exactly right. That
that's terrific. But a follow-up question, moving away from business and success and getting to nuts and bolts of aquatic systems. In retrospect, your Brucanella outbreak, your disaster at the grand opening, do you look back and say, this could have been prevented if I had only...
Absolutely. I mean, it could have been prevented. The thing was, my grand opening had already been announced, but I wasn't ready. I was running behind. Had I had my grand opening pushed a month out, I would have gotten the fish in, realized there was an issue, had time to quarantine, fully treat the system. Everything would have been running smooth. But, you're pushing everything. I need to open now because I have rent due. I have to start making money like immediately. So that timeline was really truncated, even though could have delayed. I didn't have time. So I got the fish in like 2 days before the grand opening. So there was a lot of things I could have done completely different had I been given the opportunity or even had the knowledge. But it was like my first real business to open to the public. And I made every single possible mistake that you can imagine, that being one of the most public ones. But I'd made every mistake. That was a painful one, just because it's hard when everybody sees you fail. That's just difficult.
All right. 2 more questions. One final one from Ben. What do you think sets you apart from everyone else when you're performing a pitch?
I like to think I'm an extremely good storyteller, and I have a lot of confidence when I'm on a stage. I'm more comfortable in talking to like 500 people than I am to 5. So I excel in those type of competitions when it's very high pressure on a stage. I like that type of atmosphere. And I think having the ability to feel and sound genuine to an audience is, I think, one of my skill sets.
That's great advice also. And in a couple of our classes, we have a project that the students need to present to the class. Sometimes there's only 5 or 10 or 12 people in the class. And some of them are so terrified to get up there and stand up in front of the class and speak. And I strongly encourage them to do that because you never know when in life it's going to become important to do that.
You are constantly having to put yourself out there. And as soon as you get comfortable doing that, everything becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. So I always tell them, whether it's a wedding toast or a sales pitch or a big conference, you're never going to have a less intimidating crowd than you have right here in this classroom with just us. This one is from Lily. Out of all the marine life you've worked with, what was your favorite marine animal that was in your care?
It's hard because I love them all, but I currently have a baby cownose ray that I'm growing out, and I just love him so much. He's like my favorite animal. I get to hand feed him a couple times a day, and it's the highlight of my day. It's just so cute.
Was he born there at your facility?
He wasn't. He was bred at another facility, and they were rehoming him, so they gave him to us, and we've just been able to grow him out till he's big enough to go in our big display tank.
That's adorable. I love
Yeah,
him.
and he's so cute. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, Tamara, thank you so much for sitting through all of these questions. And I'm really excited for this to be available to my students and for them to benefit from all of your years of experience in this journey you're on. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being on the show again and for asking me all the questions. I think it's nice for the viewers to kind of get to know me and my background a little bit. So this was really great. I do want to impart one piece of advice to your students. And that is to build out their professional profiles. And a lot of people, especially if they're shy, they don't like to do it. They don't like to be on LinkedIn. They don't like to share their successes, their education, or whatever it is that they're working on. It's really important to do that kind of stuff because people don't know what you're doing unless you're sharing it. And we don't have careers nowadays where you work at one place for 40 years, right? We're constantly having to job hop and look for the next opportunity. And if people know who you are or what you're working on, it makes the job search a lot easier. So you have to become like your own brand marketing in a way. And it's important to build out your resume always. So I always say for people, just go be a guest speaker. I mean, whatever you know, you can share it. Somebody else doesn't know. Go volunteer at a school, go give a lecture, go to your local reef club and give a talk. Do something that builds out your resume and your skill set on a regular basis to build out that resume as possible. Like just having that you worked at a place on a resume isn't enough anymore. You worked on a resume plus you did all these other things. You have these publications, you have all these events or whatever, like all of that really helps. And then the more people that you know in your circle, the easier it is for your career. I wish I would have had that advice 20 years ago. I'd probably have like a stacked resume at this point. And one of my friends, he's bred a lot of species first, and he's always irritated because he goes to conferences and nobody knows who he is. Like, or he'll apply for a job and nobody knows who he is. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't tell anybody. You didn't tell anybody of this incredible, amazing work that you're doing. Like, the world doesn't know unless you are shouting at the top of a roof somewhere saying, hey, I'm working on this. Isn't it cool? Take a picture. You're at a conference doing whatever. Make sure that you are constantly promoting yourself and your skill set in some way to build out your network and your resume.
Yeah, that's great advice. And even if they don't have any, immediate opportunity to work, you can be doing marine biology even if you don't have a job as a marine biologist. And what you're doing, whether it's in your own tank or your own system, or volunteering at the aquarium or in a program at a college, that's interesting to someone else. And
absolutely,
you can be writing an article. And if you can't write an article about it, make a Facebook post about it. Take pictures every day and keep people apprised of what you're doing. So many of my opportunities have stemmed from just that.
As I said in the very beginning, I was really shy to share information because I knew there was so many people that knew more than I did, right? But that doesn't mean you don't know something that's worth sharing.
Of course. Yeah. I tell my students, sometimes they're frustrated. Oh, I found this great paper, but there's a paywall. I can only get the abstract. I'm like, there's the author listed right there. Send them an email.
Yeah. They're going to share it with you.
They will happily send you a copy of the paper for free. They'll be, they'll feel good about the fact that you're asking them. They'll be happy to do it. And now you have a line of contact with someone important in the field. And keep it open. Keep talking to them.
Keep it open. Keep talking. Like, I remember I did that with Martin Moe, whom I love. So he was doing urchin work and I was just fascinated with it. So I just sent him an email. And I was like, hey, I have questions. And he responded. And that's just amazing, right? People are accessible if you reach out. Yeah. And people are so much nicer than you think. Most people are willing to help, especially if you play the student card. That's something else. Like, play the student card. Just be like, hi, I'm a student. Everybody's going to talk to you. Everybody wants to help you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of The Tides of Business. My name is Tamara, the CEO of Manta Systems, interviewed by Todd Gardner at Biota. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy your day.